Hey guys, so after that NBC documentary aired last week that gave us a real glimpse of what goes on in the mind of the wife of Yoon Seok-yeol, the conservative presidential candidate, and a future potential first lady of Korea, who basically said in that series of tapes that we don't really have a Me Too movement here in Korea because we're good at paying off our girls here, or at least the conservatives are, and the liberals are too cheap. That's why those politicians get in trouble. Well, NBC decided not to air additional episodes or create additional stories around this 7-hour trove that they were handed by this reporter who secretly recorded the taped conversations, and he was not from NBC. He was from like this podunk kind of like internet newspaper, Sounds of Seoul. And people were complaining. They're saying like, oh, it sounded like they just like scratched the surface and they just got like 24 minutes into this, juicy bits, and then boom, they went on to some other topic. And it looked like that they were trying to probably do it every Sunday night to pretty much capture the beginning of the weekly news cycle on Monday. Pretty good strategy. But first of all, that show looked extremely scripted by the campaign team. Like, those journalists, I have never seen such bad acting before. And I've told you before, everybody here in Korea deserves an Academy Award because everyone's just naturally good at acting. And they were so could not deviate from the script. And then also the journalistic integrity of NBC was called into question over whether they should be able to use these tapes because they were more of a personal conversation rather than like, hey, I'm a reporter, I'm interviewing you about this. Maybe I didn't tell you I'd press record, but okay, I pressed record. That did not stop the original reporter and the original news outlet from releasing more juicy bits, and it is within the journalistic integrity of every news outlet in Korea to cover the release of it by Sounds of Seoul. So that's why this week we got some more juicy tidbits. And now it looks like, this is so weird. Didn't want to say this before, but if you did think when you first saw her in that press conference, and then when she came out in her own solo Karl Lagerfeld outfit, trying to apologize to the nation, if you kind of got the sense that she looked a little bit creepy or like one of the girls from the Ring horror movies, well, you're not that far off, because according to these new recordings, oh yeah, she wants to set up the Ministry of Exorcism and Magic or something if she gets into the Blue House. So when first ladies in the United States, they get elected to Washington, D.C., they're supposed to redecorate the White House, and they probably are pulling out wallpaper patterns from their purse that they've already kind of prepared just in case if they get elected or her husband gets elected to the White House. Well, in this situation, she is chomping at the bit to kind of create this whole ministry of exorcism or magic or something, and it's not going to look like Harry Potter, because in this recording, she said that she wanted to move in a shaman right into one of the guest houses on the Blue House compound. Yeah, the presidential office. Now, I have nothing against real shamans and real people who are involved in that culture, because it is part of Korean history. It has influenced our art and our music, and people still use them for traditional ceremonies. But there's been a lot of con people associated with that world, because you could basically control people's decisions by saying this is what you're supposed to be doing, this is what the spirits had told me that you should be doing. And I have nothing against psychics or tarot readings or good astrology. I love a good one every now and then, and my friends even say, you put 2 drinks in me, I could give you a good reading with some tarot cards. But I just really give them a good read and they just accept it because there's like tarot sauce on it. But this is totally different. This is not an appreciation of that kind of a world. This is a true risk where you are introducing the element of potential con men, con women who disguise themselves as shamans, going straight into the presidential compound, living there, and then influencing every single decision that is made on behalf of the entire country. Our national defense, national security, national economy, national direction, diplomacy, our everything. So at first, the recording basically talked about how her husband actually really knew one of these shamans from way back. She said that her husband met this monk Mujung, and then she was really quick to say like, oh, he's not a real monk, he just calls himself a monk, but he's not a monk. But he basically was able to guide the direction of her husband's life when he was in his 20s. Now, Yoon Seok-yeol tried to become a lawyer for the longest time. Whatever exam that you have to take for his career, he kept failing that. I think it took him like 10 years or something. So he was definitely on the kind of like bottom end of all of that. And so actually that is something that does endear him to voters, because that is one kind of aspect that people really appreciate, that wow, even if I fail over and over and over again at taking like a public civil service exam or the law school exam, I can still make it. And he's running for president. So that counts a lot in a lot of people's books. But she said that when he went to this shaman, he was basically probably stressed out, like, I'm failing every year, because they only take the test once a year and it's not like the SATs. So it's like taking the test every year. And then the monk said, well, you're gonna have to try 3 more times, give it 3 more years. And then she said, whoa, after 3 years he passed. And so they're basically saying like, oh, he is a magical shaman because he predicted that he would pass it within 3 years. Girl, if you didn't pass it within 3 years, I don't know, you have no business being a prosecutor. So then she said that, oh, he had no intention or idea of becoming a prosecutor, but the monk said, in your future, it's supposed to be that you're supposed to go and become a prosecutor. So then he became a prosecutor. And she said that this monk essentially dictated the course of his life. Then she also revealed like, oh, well, this monk said that we would be great as partners in marriage because we are opposites. And then she said like, well, he even noticed or predicted that I, as Kim Geon-hee, the girl, would be more of like the man, and Yoon Seok-yeol is the woman. And she's like, oh my goodness, like, who would have ever thought of it that way, that I would be the man and he's the woman? But it actually, after being married, it is so true. He's the woman, I'm the man. Therefore, I think that explains that whole Karl Lagerfeld outfit that she wore when she had to make her public apology. But this was really weird how she said it. She says, 우리 남편이 완전 여자인 거야. 완전. So I was like, oh dang, maybe this is going to be the snippet that people are going to be like, dang, this is the most shocking thing, because she is degrading her husband into like a beta male, and it totally makes sense about like, you know, there is a correlation of like these people who are very misogynistic, they themselves feel like less of a man, so that's why they have to attack women all the time. And one of his big campaign pledges after he tried to really re-energize his voter base was to say, let's get rid of the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, and let's, you know, bash women. And that apparently was not the most shocking thing. Perhaps they wanted to get rid of that ministry because they wanted to maybe use the funds for a ministry of exorcism or magic or something, because it turns out from the next set of recordings that Kim Geon-hee herself is an amateur exorcist, or she might be a con woman fronting as such. So she was telling this reporter, oh, you know what? I can give you a reading. Just send me a picture of your face without glasses and send me a picture of your palms. And so in Korea, there's also a way of fortune telling that is based on your physical features of your face to determine your fortune and whatnot. It's another reason why there's a lot of plastic surgery here, because people are trying to change their fortune, literally. And so she told him, now this was in her reading that she got. She said, you'd be better off being a conservative. If you were born in the Park Chung-hee era, you know what you would have been? You would have been working in the security division at the Supreme Prosecutor's Office to hunt down communists. Yeah, that's what came to her in her reading. And then she said, if you look at your palm, it says you can't last much longer at the Sound of Seoul where you're working at now. So remember in earlier conversations, she was trying to recruit him and get him out of that media outlet and really, or just kind of be like her pawn in the media to kind of make her releases happen whenever she wanted it, and then also have him attack her husband's rivals as like kind of like that, you know, nagging reporter. Well, she said, like, your fate is to move jobs. That's probably right. That's in your fate. And like, if you like listen to the tone of her voice, she was just like kind of like waiting for him to kind of say like, oh yeah, like you could totally tell he was a little bit skeptical. But when he was sort of I think he was playing along. Like when it sounded like he was playing along, like, oh, I kind of believe. She's like, yeah. I think that's in your fate. That's totally in your fate. And then she said, I can see how you're unsatisfied with your job just looking at your palm. That's the message that came in. You can't stay any longer at this job. It says to wait until the election is over, but I think you can switch jobs before the election. So do you see how then these types of shaman people, these fake charlatans who pretend they can read the future, say one thing like, oh, I think it says to wait until after the election, but what works better for her is if he does not wait until after the election and he works for her now before the election. And so she says, but I think you can switch jobs before the elections. That's how I saw it. I don't know. And she used this word, disillusionment. I don't know what your life disillusionment is all about, but that word just popped into my head. And then she says, why are you disillusioned? Typical con woman move, because she's trying to get at a point of like a thing of like a nerve and fish for this information as if she knew what was going on in his mind, but she doesn't know. She says, oh, I think you're upset about something. Everybody's always upset about something, right? But she's like, I know you're upset about something, but what are you upset about? Well, if she was really a shaman, she would exactly know why, right? Well, she says, you have to tell me because I'm only telling you all of this because it's the absolute truth. She sounds like a con woman. Then she goes on. She's trying to build her credibility. She says, well, everybody comes to me for a shaman exorcism. This is not just palm reading. This is not just face reading. This is not just going to what she calls a traditional fortune teller that is more of like Korean style astrology that's, you know, based on like charts and stuff. She says like, I don't even go to those. Like she was looking down on those traditional fortune tellers who kind of use more of a scientific method. And she's like, because everyone just comes to me for a real exorcism. Like the thing where like, you know, people are just dancing around and doing all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I guess she does that stuff. And she even said that 2 prominent politicians have done it. Hong Jun-pyo, yeah, also one of the candidates that was supposed to be like one of the front runners for president in the Conservative Party, and Yoo Seung-min, another big party bigwig. And the reporter asked, oh, did they get an exorcism too? And she's like, yeah, of course. And she's like, well, I'm not somebody who's been possessed by the spirit, because apparently like shamans, like they have to be like possessed by the spirit. But she's like, but I still have that sixth sense and, you know, perception. Con woman. Oh, because we have a special relationship, I could talk to you about this and tell you all about this. Con woman. So Hong Jun-pyo, Yoo Seung-min, they both had to deny this publicly. I don't know. I think they might have taken a, you know, little bit of a twirly-do trip around the campfire a little bit, but who knows? They say that they never did this, and this is creating, again, divisions within the Conservative Party. We don't have that much time left until the election, and it looks like the Conservative Party cannot move in one unitary block. And so again, like I said in my last video, An Cheol-soo, I think it's time for you to throw a party, send those invites far and wide, and try to get some of these political enemies that are within each party, because a lot of people don't like what's going on in their own houses. So invite them to your house. So that is just super creepy, and a lot of the politicians and a lot of the media discussions out here right now, and the people are just saying like, look, this is nutso. Because even though shamanism is like recognized as part of Korean culture, it is definitely something that, you know, we distance ourselves from, in the sense of like, you don't like totally fall into it. There are definitely a lot of people who do, so that's a problem. Cults are a big problem in Korea. Going to fortune tellers and, you know, shamanism and shamans are also a big problem, because people don't, instead of going to a therapist, a lot of times people go to like shamans and fortune tellers. And instead of being able to think on your own, my theory is that when you're a little kid in Korea, there's a high mental cost to not just totally give up and just follow what you're being told. It's just easier that way. But by the time you get to become a functional adult, you're not so functional, because you can't think on your own, and then you realize like the people who are directing you and telling you what to think, they weren't that smart. So that's why you're probably going to like creepy people like this, like saying like, oh my god, like this is what like these spirits are telling me, and this. And so what you do is you're able to capture a lot of people from wide swaths of society and tell them that this is in their destiny, this is the choice that they should be making, but these choices have a direct benefit to a certain group of people. So who should we give this government contract to? That's like millions of dollars. Well, a shaman can probably tell you that if they live in the blue house. Oh, you know, like what policy should we set with this country or whatnot that would maybe benefit one group or the other politically, or one business group or the other politically? Well, a shaman can tell you that. And who controls the shaman? Whoever controls the shaman controls the power. And so this is the risk that a lot of people are seeing with this lady, is that she ain't not really a first lady. She's more of like the first exorcist, or the first shaman, or the first, I don't know, Miss Potter wannabe. And she can control a lot of people's minds and not have her fingerprint on it, because they're not going to go around and say like, oh, the shaman told me. No one's ever going to say that, even though that's what they're basing their decisions on. And that is the problem that a lot of people had with President Park Geun-hye, because her best friend, Choi Soon-sil, was totally up on all of this stuff. She would do the same exact things, doing all this weird shamanistic stuff and influencing national policy, the national government, superseding all of the elected officials and appointed officials and government officials who have spent their careers. Yeah, a lot of them are probably corrupt, but at least that they were working in the government space and industry, and they earn their jobs. They just didn't walk in like as if they were like some, fake Rasputin shaman person coming in. So what do you think, guys? Do you think Korea should just come out with it, just be public about it and say like, look, we have tons of cults here. They influence politics a lot. A lot of politicians are tied up in it, get a lot of funding from it. So we might as well just open up a ministry of exorcism and magic and shamanism. Yeah, why not? Just be open about it then. Or do you think this is like totally crazy? This is so nuts. But this is also, again, wow. We got somebody who can basically be doing that. Or we got somebody who, I don't know, just like calls up hitmen. We really need to be careful about what we decide to do for our future. All right, guys. See you again next time.